since a lot of people were at Summit. So welcome to the Janus community meeting. It is May 25th, and I've just added the agenda, so feel free to add some items in there. I think the first couple things I just wanted to mention was that we do have our community site updates. I'm also going to share my screen super quickly, and we're going to continue to update this, but I know last time we met, we talked about having a new site. So this is the new site, and what we have here is all of our old blogs have also, our old blogs have been added here, so everything still exists here. We have our community page. We now have a plugins page, and this plugins page is essentially has like a template at the top that just explains like NPM, title, and a little brief description, but then it pulls in the README from each of the plugins. So it's great. So everything will always match. Images are coming in super nicely. So that's been great. We did have sometime along the week last week, we had a request to make sure we had images in these. So that worked out well. And trying to see what else. Paul put some cool things on the side here so you can easily get to certain sections. But then we have, light and dark, etc. And then on the bottom, all the things on the bottom on the footer are working too. So get quick access to our Slack, YouTube, Twitter, all of those things. We do have a documentation tab that's now available and begging for contributors. So I would say we're definitely looking for contributors to either blog or, add documentation. If people are interested, let us know. And the other thing that we did do is we were able to get our plugins into the Backstage Marketplace. So not all of them. I think we have 7 or 8 now. So we're using the Janus color. Oh, they put a new tab on there. That's new. We're using the Janus color behind the icons. But they do say by Red Hat, if you hit explore, they're bringing us to the Janus community site to get a little bit more information about them as well. And then from here, you can go to NPM. So that's where we are with that. Did I miss anything on that? Is anybody aware if I missed anything on that? If so, please jump in. All right. So thanks to everybody who got that done. Paul, Christoph, others. Go ahead, Tom.
Just a quick question. Do we want to promote all the other plugins that we have internally in Janus on the community page as well? That we are not, not all the plugins will probably land in the Spotify or OpenShift, Backstage. It's too early morning.
Yeah.
In the Backstage IO marketplace, right? But we want to get all of them to the Janus IDP showcase website. Is that correct? So we have a list of plugins in our GitHub repository, right? And right now we're showing just a subset of them on Backstage IO and a similar subset, or probably the same subset on the Janus IDP IO side. Do we want to get all of those plugins in either of those places?
My assumption would be that we should, once we think that they've been tested and documented properly, we should put them on both.
Okay.
Unless like I would say that's the assumption, unless there's a reason not to. At this point, I don't know what the reason would be not to. Maybe that can be the rule. And then if there's trying to think though, I'm not sure what's there that we don't have up right now, actually. I think we ended up putting all of them on, but I might be wrong for sure.
You might be missing the 3 scale on the showcase, but they should be they should be all there.
Oh, you mean on the showcase rather than on
the
page?
I meant on the community page, but
yeah,
the community page, like Serena mentioned, if they have been tested and the value and the documentation is good, we should have them on the community page.
Yeah. So for now, for example, the Janus
You're on
IDP,
mute, Sarah.
I was just gonna say that the OpenShift internal registry one, that one just got, I think that one got merged before I put up the PR to the other two places. So we should add that one for sure.
and for example, the scaffolder actions that we have.
That was a question I had. So that's interesting because I don't think they show that in the Backstage community, a Backstage plugins page. I do think it would be very cool for us to have that in our community site. I don't know if that would go under plugins or another section.
It's a plugin.
It is a plugin.
Yeah, it's a type of plugin, scaffolder
Okay.
module. So
Yeah, I think that's a
we,
good
we
idea.
can maybe add some categories or tags to it, so people
Okay.
also see that this is this type of plugin or other type of plugin. That may be useful.
That sounds great. I'm gonna add a note on that one. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm turning this into a brainstorming session.
That's okay. All right. I just added things here with like new plugins added. Do we have Gorkum online? Because I think he was the one who added the analytics provider segment. I was wondering if we could, if anybody has anything to say about that so we could all learn. Maybe. Does anybody know about that one?
Not in details, but if you're using segment and you want to have metrics from your Backstage instance, then you just add it. That will send the kind of like the telemetry to the server.
Okay. And then I was just looking at the PRs, that there's PRs up for the Matamo. Actually, Pancho, I don't know if there is one for learning plugin, but you mentioned that last time. It also looks like there was OCM updates and I guess additional information on JFrog Artifactory. So if anybody's here that wants to talk about any of that stuff.
Well, about the LMS, it's still work in progress. As I said on the previous meeting, I hope to have something functional to show next week. The X-ray integration, it has been kind of tough. The API of JFrog is not so friendly, but I still hope to have something functional on that side next week too.
Excellent.
And according to the OCM PRs, so I wanted to work on it, but Sam was faster. So Sam put up PRs for the UI refresh on the OCM page. So we got together with Serena and did some UX redesign on what we want to see on the OCM widgets and stuff like that. So we are kind of gonna refine that UI pieces there a bit. So there's a issue associated with the pull request with some mockups, so you can see how that will look like.
Great. That's good. What's next? Home chart update. Is that you, Tom?
Yes, that's me. So over the last couple of weeks, I've been scrambling to get the home chart updated according to what Christoph suggested before, to switch the home chart to actually show something useful than just a base blank Backstage image. So right now we released a breaking change, major version bump of the home chart. And now if you deploy it with the default values, it deploys a Postgres database. So you're not stuck with a SQLite ephemeral deployment. It also, and besides that, it uses the Backstage showcase image. So instead of having a completely blank bare bones Backstage, you get something that is preloaded with at least a couple of plugins and can be somewhat useful. to. So if you're exploring Backstage, the idea is like that if you're exploring Backstage and trying to learn what the system is about, you don't need to figure the plugin ecosystem from the start, but you get a lot of the stuff preloaded and see if this makes sense to you. If it doesn't, you can move on. If it does, you can start exploring how to add plugins, how to rebuild images and whatnot. But as a starting point, it's moving you way ahead of like a complete bare bones Backstage. So that's an update on the Helm chart itself. And we also published this new chart version into the OpenShift console Helm catalog. So whenever that catalog refreshes, and I've asked about that today morning, and they will do the refresh today, hopefully. So by today, the Backstage Helm chart should be available in the developer perspective in OpenShift console Helm catalog. So if you're an OpenShift user and you want to start exploring Backstage, it's just an easy search in your catalog within the OpenShift console, clicking a few buttons to get it installed, and you're all set up.
That's awesome. Awesome news. I guess the other thing is for people who are not Red Hatters on the call, there was a Red Hat summit this week. And inside of the Red Hat Summit, we do have a community area. So we did talk about Janus and do some demos there as well. So trying to remember, Tom, I think Tom, you and I had something in the central, in the community central. We had quite a bit of people. I don't know, 30, 40, maybe. It was pretty
Something like
exciting.
Yep.
Yeah. So there was a ton of people who came to that. So that was pretty exciting. And then I think the other thing that we can mention that I don't know that we can share any metrics yet, but I know that Christoph, you added metrics to both our Janus site as well as the Showcase app, right? So that pretty soon we might be able to just be publishing information just so people are understanding how often the community is actually being accessed. So that will be interesting, I think, to kind of see a history of over the upcoming months. We have had the number of people in our external Slack grow a ton. Even though we don't have a ton of conversation there, we do have, I think we had another like 30 people join this week. So that's pretty good. So I'm going to say welcome to Kevin because he's a familiar face of old, but no long, but is now on our call. So welcome to joining the call.
Thanks, Serena.
Yeah.
We worked driving Backstage items there. So there's maybe some space for collaborating on some bits. Some of the things we were interested in are discovery of resources from OCI. So in other words, being able to point an entity provider essentially at an OCI repository and have the entities pulled in from there. So that might have some shared interest. Being able to bootstrap Backstage resources from clusters, right? So one of the difficulties that we see is people don't have a clue how to start getting their components into Backstage. So we're looking at kind of automatic discovery, if we can, based on things like Kubernetes recommended labels and some additional annotations. So we're like looking at ways you could effectively run a tool against your cluster, discover the components and generate the YAML for those. So that's perhaps something that's interesting. Cluster API discovery. So we have a plugin that we're testing internally that will query our cluster and discover the CAPI clusters within there and make those available as both resources and, of course, through the entity mechanism as clusters that you can use. Obviously, Flux stuff. So we're obviously heavily involved in Flux. We're looking at kind of we're currently reviewing a PR which has a number of Flux plugin elements, so cards and info pages and things like that to view Flux resources. And the last thing is we're looking at tenancy generation. So obviously Backstage knows what components you have and what teams are responsible for those components. So one of our interests is in like how can we transform that into kind of Kube RBAC and policy type statements to basically based on what we consider to be the tenancy information for from Backstage. So that's the kind of things that we're interested in just now.
Interesting.
I would be very interested in what you do about the cluster discovery and also about the catalog ingestion and catalog discovery, this type of things, because we've been discussing, for example, the catalog ingestion, like discovering entities, components, systems, and whatnot in the upstream community, and they are pretty reserved. They don't want that to happen automatically. So I would like to just explore or see what you think about that and what's the idea behind it, basically, because this was kind of we were coming from a similar place probably when we came back to the upstream community about this, and we've been surprised how they want the catalog to be fairly static and not vulnerable to like people just randomly deploying stuff and those things appearing in the catalog and things like that.
I think there's two sides to this. So if you go and look, I think in Big Heavy D on GitHub, you will find there is a thing called Peanut Backstage, which was last year's attempt at this, and it does automatically sync the providing of resources. But I've kind of come away from there to a more bootstrap thinking around this. So like people that have nothing essentially up front, they want to get their components in. So they basically would run like a CLI tool, point it at their cluster, give it some options, and it would spit out resources that were discovered by looking at deployments and services and things, and then looking at the Kubernetes standard labels and the annotations on that. So in other words, really seeing it. I mean, like the code that's up would do it automatically. Like in fact, that's the instruction. Say just basically point your location at the HTTP server that's doing that. But I've kind of shifted from there to more of a like you would run a bootstrap of that to get your initial set of components, write them to your Git repository, put that as your location, and sync it. I mean, to be honest, right, the implementation, like as you can imagine, the core of it is give me a Kubernetes client, point at a cluster, tell me some things you maybe want, and I'll go and figure out the components. Like whether you run that every 2 minutes or whether you do that once every week and write the output, it really doesn't matter that much from our perspective.
So you basically run it asynchronously, so you dump all those resources into files on a whatever storage, and that is being ingested into the catalog separately. You're not interfacing with the catalog directly.
For the code, you can go and find out a link to it and give me a second. But
yes.
So this was last year's attempt to this. This was very early exploration of how to do this. It does it like you basically point a location in your app config and say like source from this HTTP server, and that HTTP server queries kube and then serves up the resources. As I say, I think that works, but I'm probably as squeamish as the upstream folks are about like random changes to it impacting things, especially because someone removing labels would effectively cause like entities to disappear from there. So for me personally, like I think the tool is probably something that you run once, but maybe more than that, and it parses your cluster and generates these things in pictures. I mean, really, it's to get people started, right? We're like trying to figure out how do we make people like get people from having no Backstage setup. We see both, right? We see people who have Backstage already, and they're like, just give us your plugins. But we also have people who are kind of, we don't really know where to even start, so we haven't gone down that route. And like that particular setup lends itself to point at a cluster. We'll do the discovery for you. We can do the initial setup. You may have to populate some extra elements and things like that, but that would give you that initial set of components, like your systems and things like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that led me to thinking around like how do you enrich those resources with additional annotations for additional plugins and stuff like that. So you need, yes, this is like a bootstrap step, and then you finding you as a next step you refine that catalog and enrich it with those integrations. Right, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
like
mean,
that.
you know, yourself, people don't know where to start. You know, like it's
Yeah, definitely,
there's a lot of
definitely.
resources, and so that's kind of how
It's
we're
a
thinking.
huge, complicated thing. So yeah, definitely makes sense. Thank you.
And do you guys have a lot of plugins? I'm looking in the Backstage, the marketplace there, and it looks like you guys have one published from WeWorks. Do you guys have a lot of others?
We have a private repo just now, which we are putting Flux-centric plugins into with a view to a release at some point soon. I don't have a definite date, but the initial set are all centered around like kind of developer views of Flux resources, right? So like the brief that I'm giving here is that we will put like green versions, make people so they can quickly look at it and assess the situation, but with links through to GitOps, so the upstream actual product links. And that's the common case in Backstage. That's what you do, isn't it? You pull data and link through to the main. So that's pretty much what we're doing. So we have Helm releases. We can view like the current state of your deployed Helm release, customizations, a couple of tables. And we're starting to pull starting to look at what components we have from Weave GitOps and from We've GitOps Enterprise and those components, and thinking about what plugins we can provide for them. I mean, to a certain extent, it's not so much plugins as much as, you know, the cards. Fundamentally, what's the useful things in the pages that are useful to people, basically. And we think right now, certainly it's in the plan, and I am running the plan, so, you know, take from this what you want. We are thinking about like there may have to be some sort of distribution, but as you probably discovered, that's kind of fraught with danger. You have this core set of plugins that you want to provide on top of a core set of your own plugins. And then after that, it gets a bit more woolly. You know, the people that want the GitHub pull requesting, but then some people want the GitLab one and all those kind of things. So we're trying to figure out where that line sits as to what we would support, and then make it easy for people to add additional plugins.
Interesting. Yeah. Because yeah, I won't ask you. Never mind. That's great. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
Does anybody else have anything to add today? Trying to remember if anything in our conversations the last couple of days had come up for interesting new plugins. Oh, do we want to talk about anything around anything that's in the upstream? I don't know if there's any updates around the upstream work in Backstage community that we wanted to share here.
Like, it's not about not wanting to share, but there's nothing to share.
Okay, that's good.
So, yeah, we didn't work much upstream this week because for last 2 weeks, because we've been busy with Red Hat Summit and all those associated events. So that's been a busy period because of that. We are running, like, we should start actively looking into the exploration around the quick start that Spotify was hinting. So there's a Discord channel for that, a separate one, a separate work stream. I don't remember the name. I'm gonna pull it up, where we started a couple of discussions. It's very short, but we started discussing how that might look like, and how that declarative UI configuration can be done and whatnot. And we have a front-end focused repository. I don't know how many repositories. Oh, we have four experiments there already by Spotify in this repository. Around really completely just trying to get something piloted, or it's not like this is the way how we think this should work, or how this should look like, or that this setup should compile and run or whatever. It's just a like DSL syntax exploration type of work. How that might behave and how that might scale. So we need to start actively looking into that and chipping out ideas and our experience from other projects where we did something similar. And sharing those as experiments, so Backstage can gain a proper system for this, and which doesn't bite us in butt in the long run. And by us, I mean Spotify community of users. It's completely upstream work. So, and why I'm talking about it here, Spotify initially wanted to take this kind of themselves and behind closed doors. So we're trying as much as we can on as many fronts as we can to share this work and make it a really upstream collaboration, because I think we can benefit from other people's experience in this. And it's going to affect the whole ecosystem anyways. So we want to do this upstream.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks for the update. All right. Anything else for today's meeting? Nope. All right. Well, thanks everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Some of us
Thank
have a
you very
long
much.
weekend, so enjoy if you do. See you soon. Bye-bye.